Now the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghy.
And welcome, everyone, to the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghy of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Good, bad, and really crazy martinis today for you as we close out the work week. And, Jim, we start with the good. This version of the story comes from CNN. A terror cell on the brink of carrying out an attack was the target of a raid Thursday that left 2 suspects dead, according to Belgian authorities. A third suspect was injured and taken into custody in the operation at a building in the eastern city of Verviers. A prosecutor spokesman, Terry Wirtz, told reporters a senior Belgian counterterrorism official told CNN that the alleged terror cell is believed to have received instructions from ISIS. Some of the members of the cell had traveled to Syria and met with ISIS, which plotted the attacks as retaliation for U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. So, Jim, double good really here. Number one, it looks like this terror cell, at least in its immediate plans, have been thwarted. And secondly, it looks like some of these countries that were kind of turning a willful blind eye to the encroachment of Sharia into different areas of their countries are ready to fight back finally.
Yeah, also worth mentioning a series of raids in Berlin, in Germany, and another separate French police arresting at least 12 people believed to be connected to these attackers. The attacks were an exceptionally dark cloud, but if they shake the European countries out of their, some would say, willful blindness, some would say naivete, it's not like French authorities or European authorities didn't know that they had a lot of radicalized youths living in their poorer neighborhoods and getting radicalized in their mosques and talking about doing terror things. I think there had kind of been this, well, we can't prove it in a court of law, and they haven't done anything yet, so maybe if we just kind of, if we're not provocative, this situation can be managed. And I don't think it's easy. I just don't think, you can manage this with these guys walking around on the street, knowing that at any given moment they can get their hands on weapons and start killing people. And so it looks like this is a step in the right direction. If we could only get our own leaders, Greg, to have that kind of a wake-up call, since obviously every FBI director and experts on terrorism say, we know there are Americans, anywhere from dozens to hundreds to perhaps even thousands, who have been to the Middle East, been to Iraq and Syria, fought with ISIS or been involved there and come back and may or may not have intent to harm Americans here. I don't know what the exact level of cause is to bring somebody in to start asking them questions. So what were you doing in Syria? But it's certainly, knowing that any one of these guys could be a ticking time bomb in the both metaphorical and non-metaphorical sense, it seems like it's a good impetus, and it's good to see the Europeans taking steps like this.
On to the bad martini now, and we've known for a while now that it was going to be fairly tough logistically to stop what just about everyone, at least on the Republican side, believes was unconstitutional activity by the president back in November when he unilaterally decided to give legal status to allegedly about 5 million adults whose kids have legal status in this country. The House earlier this week passed legislation to fund the Department of Homeland Security, but not fund that part of the president's agenda. It looks like there will not be 60 votes in the Senate to move that to the president's desk, where it would certainly be vetoed anyway. McConnell says the House bill will, in fact, get voted on in the Senate, but if, in fact, it doesn't succeed in the Senate or gets vetoed, there really doesn't seem to be a backup plan here, Jim, which brings us back to a couple of points. First of all, a lot of people are going to be very disappointed if that happens because of the very strong rhetoric that the leaders used back then. And a lot of people are also going to be scratching their heads about what the Corombos strategy was ever all about.
This is one of those circumstances where the Obama administration is being saved by its own incompetence, because the serious concerns about the southern border being unsecure, the serious concerns about the visa program, that we can't keep track of people who get into the city, the sense that our entry points at ports and at airports is not what really is needed considering the level of the threat. Obama, they're now in a circumstance where fighting over the Department of Homeland Security, there are a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans who are furious about Obama's amnesty maneuver, executive order, but do you want to mess with the Department of Homeland Security funding at a time like this? Because if something happens, God forbid, the first card the administration is going to play is like, well, we could have stopped that attack, but Republicans are playing politics with DHS funding. And that, would be that gives him the loophole he's been looking for. If anything goes wrong anywhere in the country when there's a spending fight that ends up with the DHS funding not going through, the administration is going to blame Republicans on. And I don't know if there's an easy way out of that straitjacket. I don't know how much leverage there is unless you pass a spending bill that includes everything except the implementation of the amnesty. We see how it goes. I mean, Obama probably will veto that, but maybe the administration, maybe congressional Republicans can kind of use that leverage there. I don't know how it's going to shake itself out. It just feels like there's once again a lack of leverage, and ultimately, when you have the bully pulpit of the presidency and an exceptionally shameless president, your options are much more limited.
Is this a template? Obviously, DHS funding, particularly in light of Paris, is going to be something that nobody in either party really wants to contemplate, certainly. But when it comes to the president promising to keep doing whatever he can by himself if Congress won't go along, which will obviously be the case with the GOP in control on a myriad of other issues, will the GOP have more leverage if it's not something directly related to national security, or are the hands essentially tied for the next 2 years?
If I say hands are tied, do I get called Rhino?
Not by me.
Yeah, there are people who are really furious about the circumstances and blame congressional Republicans for these circumstances. But ultimately, you lose the presidency, you lose a lot of leverage. And if you don't have a media that will report things honestly, and I think when you see members of the media saluting the courage of Charlie Hebdo and then not showing the cartoon, we are now in an era in which the media won't report certain parts of stories. And, when the idea that, we're going to get into a spending fight over this executive amnesty and say, well, Republicans were willing to pay for everything except that point is not going to come through from the media. And it's going to be, those crazy, miserly Republicans are not funding the Department of Homeland Security when there's a terror threat going on. And the 1-2 punch of a shameless president and the media, the shameless president who I think is pretty clearly willing to risk American lives for his agenda, sometimes life doesn't give you any good options, and congressional Republicans are going to have to look for the least bad option.
The president and his administration, of course, have taken a lot of heat over the fact that no major administration official showed up for the unity rally in Paris on Sunday. The U.S. ambassador to France was there, but with all those other heads of states there, it certainly looked terrible that Obama, Biden, Kerry, and Eric Holder, who was actually in Paris and still couldn't bother to show up, did not participate in the rally. John Kerry was off on a previously scheduled trip to India. Right now, here at the end of the week, he's back in France, not to apologize, but to say that he's standing with the French people. The Americans are always with the French people. And he couldn't think of a better way to say it than to bring in this fellow.
You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am.
You think I'm kidding. This is the Weekly Standard version of the story. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Paris Friday in what was billed as a show of solidarity with the French people after terrorists attacked last week. The former Massachusetts senator brought fellow Bay Stater and singer-songwriter James Taylor to sing a slightly off-key rendition of You've Got a Friend to a Parisian audience. So this is the recorded version, not the off-key version. So you're welcome, America. Jim, this is a step up, I think, from hashtag diplomacy. What do you think?
I don't know. It's a tough call. Because here's the thing. In the lyrics is just call and I'll be there. Which we weren't. And it just doesn't make any sense. Of all the people in the administration to not go to Paris, I was willing to cut Kerry a little bit of slack because he was literally on the other side of the world. He was in India, middle of this day tour of Asia. Those sorts of things aren't easy to drop in a hat and reschedule. So I could kind of see, okay, there are other people in the administration. He's when you're literally on the other side of the globe, that's a significant logistical obstacle to overcome. The purpose of his trip was, I am not paraphrasing, it's to give the French people a hug. Okay, I'd rather give him some, heads of Islamists, or something like that. And to send, James Taylor, who clearly is getting up there in years and not looking so great. And it was, it just looks embarrassing. This unbelievable cringing, people making fun of it on Twitter. I realized if I'd be making a lot of decisions very differently from John Kerry and from Barack Obama if I were running the sorts of things, Greg. But so you want to know my first thought of who we should have sent instead?
Who's that?
Twisted Sister.
Okay.
We're not going to take it, all right? We're right, we're free, you will fight, you'll see. That's the message the French need to hear right now. And failing that, let's say this happened, the previous administration, couldn't you picture President George W. Bush and Secretary of State Condi Rice sending Toby Keith to the French to sing Courtesy the Blue, White, and Red? Over on campaigns. I won't sing it. I'll spare you that. My throat's a little scratchy this morning, but I rewrote some of the lyrics, and that you can just kind of imagine. And I'm half joking, but I'm like, if you're going to say we're going to send a musical message to a country that has just suffered a terror attack, to say we're standing with you, we are with you, we are not abandoning you, we stand shoulder to shoulder, which is like exactly the message we should be sending. Having James Taylor sing it in a off key several days later, it just comes across as lame and just insufficient to the moment. Of course, why they didn't use the version from Toy Story featuring Buzz Lightyear and Woody, right? Right, Greg?
What's that?
This administration doesn't believe in cowboy diplomacy.
Very well done.
That's about to end the week there, Greg.
Considering how the week started.
Easy listening, counterterrorism.
Absolutely. Jim, you have a fine weekend. We'll pick it up again on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Geraghy of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Join us Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.
All you got to do